Hello, welcome back to the road to episode 8, my ongoing series where I chart the road to the release of Star Wars episode 8, The Last Jedi on the 13th of December 2017 and the 14th and 15th of December 2017 around the rest of the world. But there's also places like China where they're not getting it until January apparently. But anyway, nonetheless, I'm continuing on my, I wouldn't call it a marathon rewatching because I'm skimming through some of these films, but my rewatching, my refreshing of these films. And I'm now on Return of the Jedi. It is currently Tuesday, the 12th of December. I am literally less than 24 hours away from The Last Jedi now. It's getting really exciting. I read that Mark Hamill's been blocking people on Twitter, have been revealing the ending, which is just annoying, you know. But now I really have to knuckle down and just stay completely away from the internet. Though I've been very cautious, to be fair. I've basically done the least amount that I can do in terms of avoiding stuff. I've done the least amount of browsing. You know, I've been really careful, and so far, no hints of any spoilers. So, on with Return of the Jedi. I'm going to skim through this. Once again, it is the film print version. This one's called the Grindhouse edition because it's the least cleaned up. There's a lot of heavy damage to this print. But I watched it in full back in, was it March, April, when we did 24-hour Movie Marathon 6. So I feel like talking about this film too much is going to, I don't know, just repeat myself, because I've already done a fairly lengthy, you know, discussion on it with Connie at the end of this year's 24-hour Movie Marathon, and, you know, and then we got to review it one day for the 1001 Movies book, so I don't know. I don't want to talk about it too much, I guess. I mean, my introduction to the film obviously was when I watched the original trilogy, and I was so excited to see the third one after what happened at the end of Empire Strikes Back, and it became my favourite film. It was my favourite Star Wars film when I was a kid. Loved it so much, loved the Ewoks, fell in love with the Ewoks, and I really think this film lives and dies by the Ewoks. You can't deny that this has great Star Wars moments in it, but if you don't like the Ewoks, you ain't gonna like the film because there's so much of them, and that idea of not nature so much, but the little man, you know, or again just the technological advances, you know, losing out to primal kind of ingenuity, you know, where you have these little Ewoks, these little creatures fighting against the Empire and taking them down, and it gets a bit ridiculous when you see these stormtroopers getting, you know, felled by, you know, little like catapults and stuff and little rocks on strings, but I like the idea of it. And I suppose the big battle takes place up in space, but then down on the ground you have this, you know, fairly small garrison of stormtroopers that get, you know, taken down by the Ewoks and all of their traps and stuff. And honestly, I love it. I really do. It's one of my favorites, and for me, the whole Emperor Luke Vader stuff is just absolute grade A gold. I love it. It's just so enjoyable. Ian McDiarmid was such an inspired piece of casting. He is so brilliant as the Emperor. Like, he's just so deliciously evil that it's so fun to watch, but you still are invested in Luke's story and Luke's struggle, and the idea of him wearing all black to tease him going to the dark side was an interesting one. I've never been quite sure what exactly the timeline is, though, because at the end of Empire they say, alright, Lando flies off, we're going to go rescue Han, and Luke says, I'll meet you at the rendezvous point, which insinuates that Return of the Jedi happens immediately after Empire Strikes Back. But it feels like there's time has passed. You know, Luke has now changed his look, you know, he seems to have gone through some stuff, he has a new lightsaber he's built, so I'm not sure what the timing of that really all is. I think in some website years ago when I was a kid, it said that there was like 2 or 3 years between the two, which seems a bit weird to me. Anyway, I don't know. I don't think there's really an official version out there. Well, there probably is now because they need to have everything be canon, so they probably figured that out exactly how much time has passed between the two films. But anyway, I'm going to start the film. I'm just trying to find things to talk about. The Ewoks, okay, before we start the film, I love the Ewok movies as well. Those Ewok movies were so mythical when I was a kid. When I heard about them, I couldn't believe that they'd even happened, and they were so scarce. A friend of mine had the video for The Battle for Endor, which is the second one, and they did these 2 TV movies in the early 80s. George Lucas was involved. Warwick Davis reprised his role as Wicket the Ewok. He got to speak a few lines as well. I don't know if he did the voice, but the character Wicket got to speak. So I grew up with that version, that Battle for Endor, the second one. And then when I was a teenager, I mean, it was so scarce. I remember looking in the free ads all the time to see if it would pop up, and then it did a couple of times. There was someone selling it in like Caerphilly or something, like the VHS tape, and it was like £25, and that was just like an astronomical sum of money to me at that point. So I never got it. But in 2004, when they released period the Star Wars films on DVD, they also released, I think, the Droids cartoon, the Ewok cartoon, and the 2 Ewok movies, the Caravan of Courage and Battle for Endor, in a double pack. I got it and I watched them, and I got to see the first one, and I loved them. They're just fun Saturday morning kind of kids movies. I just love them. And I made a big mistake when my brother was born, maybe 1 or 2 years old, I suppose. Well, not when he was born then, but when he was really young. I lent him the DVD because I thought he'd really enjoy them. And of course he's 1 or 2 years old, and the disc was just, you know, used as a coaster pretty much. It got scratched beyond belief, and now that DVD is very rare, and I really want it. I want to watch those films again, even though I know they're not great. There's so much nostalgia tied to that I really enjoy. It makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside thinking of those Ewok movies. Anyway, I like the Ewoks. If you don't, tough shit. So I'm going to watch Return of the Jedi now, and we'll see if I have anything interesting to say about it. As you can see, this one is really scratched up, hence being called the Grindhouse edition. But I think it's cool. It gives it character, and I don't know, I just enjoy it. And when we watched it for the marathon this year, I was kind of concerned, not going to lie. I thought that it might be a jarring experience to watch this in a full film. But honestly, it didn't matter after a while. You know, it's Star Wars. It's enjoyable in almost any form to me, so here we go. Select scenes from Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Directed by a Welshman, actually, Richard Marquand. So, there you go. Luke Skywalker has returned. And I don't have this one on Blu-ray burned, but I have the file of the film print version. It has all these audio options, including Russian. But we have like 1983 stereo mix, the 1993 Laserdisc audio commentary, isolated score. So the fans put a lot of effort into this, which is really cool. One of the best moments here, I love it. And I also love the parodies of this moment with just the endless kind of reaction shots and the kind of music going on there. Man, the excitement when I first saw this, just awesome. Yeah! Kill those guys! I hope one day to achieve the level of comfortability that Yoda seems to achieve when he kind of lies down here and pulls this little blanket up over himself. It just looks so comfortable. I don't know what it is. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, oh man, I want to go to bed. I never understood this when I was a kid. When he says there is another Skywalker. I always thought he said there's another Sky Rock. Like, I just never got it. Obviously when, you know, Obi-Wan's like, oh yeah, you have a sister, so, you know, I get it, but for years I never knew that Yoda pretty much laid it out to Luke in that little speech there. So that's really well done, by the way, with the blanket. Love it. Now just watching the scene where Leia meets Wicket the Ewok, and it's the first time I've seen it since Warwick Davis appeared in my marathon video. Look, guys, I'm gonna mention it. You know, it's just so fucking cool, you know, that someone who is in Return of the Jedi was in my video in a fashion in which I wrote his lines and he performed them the way I asked him to. Mind blowing, so fucking cool. I love all this stuff in the forest. I never know again if it's the forest moon of Endor or whether the moon is called Endor. I never know. But Endor, you know, the forest moon planet, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is called. I love the location. They shot it in the Californian redwoods. I would love to go there one day. And it's just a great, you know, again, I love that the flavor that the original trilogy has in terms of the locations and the real locations, you know. All shot on stage in England, but then actual location stuff done in Tunisia for Star Wars, Norway for Empire Strikes Back, and California for Return of the Jedi. But in these, again, exotic locations, you know, the thick forests with these huge trees, or you know, these snowy kind of glaciers, and then the sparse desert of Tunisia. You get all these different locations and flavors, and you know, often you can kind of, you know, poke fun at the fact that in Star Wars, every kind of planet seems to just have one one kind of landscape. You know, you look at like Tatooine, all desert, you know, Hoth, all snow. But you know, it's with the conceit of the story which is being told, which is kind of just a fairy tale at the end of the day. Oh, the Emperor. Oh, I love him. I love the idea that the big bad gets revealed in this film. And you know, ultimately, we never really knew anything about the Emperor. You know, is he even called Palpatine in any of the original films? I don't know. And you know, people these days with the sequels, oh, what's Snoke? Who's Snoke? Where does he come from? It's like, well, did we know anything about the Emperor really until George Lucas did the prequel trilogy? And speaking of the prequels, one thing I can say, I suppose, is that bridging the gap from the prequels to the originals, it still doesn't feel as seamless as I would like it to. I feel a disconnect, you know. When I watched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in one sitting about 4 years ago, before The Force Awakens had come out, I decided to marathon all 6 in one go just to see what it was like. And that transition from 3 to 4 was so rough, because I was starting to imagine Hayden inside the suit in Star Wars, and it just felt all kinds of wrong to me. It was just weird, and also just the look, the visual look, the heavy CGI to the sparse kind of practical effects. It's such a weird transition, and I guess it's just all down to the fact that the films were made later, and so they look completely different. And you know, on Sunday when I watched Revenge of the Sith and talked about in that video how much I loved revisiting that film, and it was probably the most I'd ever enjoyed it, I still feel like it has that digital sheen to it, that kind of just clean, you know, and I can't think if there were any actual locations in Revenge of the Sith, like real life locations. In The Phantom Menace they had real locations, more than any of the prequels. Episode 2 they went to Italy for that stuff with Padme and Anakin, and also Tunisia for the stuff. I guess they did shoot in Tunisia for episode 3, but they did it while they were shooting episode 2. I remember there's an online video of them shooting episode 2 in Tunisia. They used to have this service on StarWars.com called Hyperdrive, where you could sign up and pay money to get to see exclusive webisodes of the making of the films as they were getting made. There was even something for episode 3, I think, where they had webcams on the set that you could watch like a live feed. So anyway, there was a behind-the-scenes video where George Lucas was on set, you know, in Tunisia on the homestead, where you know Luke looked out to the twin sons, and the guys behind the camera said, "So you're shooting something for episode 3, right?" And he's like, "Yep." "Can you tell us what it is?" "Nope." You know, and he's just sat there on that speeder bike, kind of playing around like a little kid. So they obviously filmed that, because why spend all the money to go back to Tunisia just for one shot or a couple of shots for the end of episode 3? Anyway, so I feel like that is something that's really helped the sequels, the sequel trilogy. The Force Awakens, they filmed in England. Where else did they film, actually, thinking about it? I think it was mainly England, actually. You know, the island, obviously, for the island at the end with Luke and Rey. I feel like there's another location they use for real. But either way, they're using proper locations. For episode 8, they went to Croatia. They went to, like, Iceland or something, or some country to do the stuff on Crate. So I feel like it helps to have that tangible, real-life location. It just absorbs you more into the world, I think. And that's the only thing that I think is really holding back Revenge of the Sith for me personally. Because I was trying to think about it. What would I rate Revenge of the Sith? And I went with 4.5 out of 5. Honestly, to me, if I felt like it was a bit more real, if I couldn't see at times that actors were literally, you know, everything around them is completely digital, takes you out of it just a little bit, you know. I just wish he hadn't leaned in so heavily on the CGI like he did with the prequels. Anyway, talking about the prequels here, and I'm watching Return of the Jedi, but I love all the, I love how the Ewoks think that 3PO's a god, you know. I am a golden god! And how they all just start bowing down and the oh, here we go. It seems like they think I'm some sort of god. Why don't you use your divine influence and get us out of this? Another thing is people talk about Han being like, or Harrison Ford phoning it in. They're like, oh, Harrison Ford was awful in Return of the Jedi. He was just sleepwalking through it. I thought he was great. I really like him in Return of the Jedi. He's funny, and, you know, I just like him. I don't know what it is. It's funny lines, you know, again, Lawrence Kasdan writing this one, but I'm going to continue watching and probably watch some of the bits at the end, and the final duel, of course, and the finale, and then finish off this brief re-skimming through the film. Which again, if you're joining this through just watching this one video, I am skimming through some of these just to, you know, keep the time moving, because again, I'll be seeing The Last Jedi in about 18 hours. So, gotta kind of speed through this. I still remember the feeling of seeing this shot and hearing that choir music coming in, and just the culmination of everything, and the music and the visual. Oh, and Luke giving in to his anger. Just fucking incredible storytelling. Good. Death by matte painting. Oh, so good. So good. I love that moment. Oh. And that's the real Anakin. Don't care what anyone says. Lando's awkward dancing. Lando's just like the guy who like just doesn't fit in at a party. Anyway, there we go. Alright, I can't say that I'm done with Return of the Jedi, because I think this is the one I watched the least of. Probably about 45 minutes worth of scenes. You know, I enjoyed coming back to it, but ultimately, you know, this is the one I'd seen most recently. So I just felt like I didn't, you know, obviously it's the timing as well, but I don't like to rewatch films that often. I mean, if I had the time, if I'd had this idea to revisit the films 2 weeks ago, I probably would have watched it in full and still really enjoyed it, but it is what it is. The ending, it's so strange how much George changed the ending. Not just in 1997, but in 2011 when he added the voice of Vader going "No" at the end, which just like that to me is one of the most offensive changes out of all of them, because you don't need that explained. You know, there's no one in the history of ever who watched Return of the Jedi and thought, why did Vader pick the Emperor up? You know, that was out of nowhere. If only we'd had some kind of clue that he was conflicted. He's looking back and forth. That's the beauty of it. It's told through this silent performance of just a black mask looking back and forth, but the way that it's done, you understand what's going on inside that head. You don't need the verbalization of it. Just so stupid. And I know people like having Hayden Christensen be at the end as Anakin, and they say that it makes sense because that's when he was last a good person, but that's just the version I grew up with. That's the version I think is the best, is seeing the old man redeemed, you know, moving on to the next plane, renewed as a person. But, you know, you could poke holes in it, I suppose, but I just... Even the way they did it, with Hayden Christensen kind of looking up and kind of this creepy smile. Ugh. Now, one thing I will say is the new music that John Williams recorded for the end of Jedi, for the special edition, I really like it. It's a great piece of music, but deep down I'll always prefer the Ewok song. But that's a change I'm completely fine with, is the new score. Though, getting to see Naboo at the end and hearing Jar Jar Binks going, "We are free!" It's like, ugh. So it's very fun to see this film the way it was originally released. And that's another thing that bothers me. I didn't want to get into all of this, but, you know, it's George's baby, it's George's, you know, creation. But, you know, other directors made these films. You know, Richard Marquand, I think he died not too long. I mean, I don't know, maybe in the 90s or something. I don't think he was around for the special editions. Maybe he was, I don't know. I know that, you know, Irving Kershner was actually quite happy with the changes that were made to Empire, so I guess that's fine, but I just feel like when work gets replaced, the guy who did the voice of Boba Fett, you know, I just think of the family of that guy who for so many years got to say that their dad or their granddad was in Star Wars, and now it's like, well, now he isn't. He's been replaced by Tamora Morrison because they need to keep continuity of the prequels. That's another thing that really bothered me, is when the originals started getting changed to match the prequels when it should have been the other way around. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into all that stuff. Return of the Jedi, I love it. It's great, and might be the easiest one to just put on and watch, I think. I love all the Jabba's Palace stuff. I like how it's this very clear kind of two-part thing where we have the Jabba's Palace beginning, and then we have just the big balls to the wall end of trilogy, hour-long kind of battle sequence that takes place down on the Forest Moon, up in the sky in the ships, and then up in the Death Star with Luke, Emperor, and Vader, and those three stories being intercut. I think it's so well done. And there is something to be said for the original Star Wars where we just follow the Death Star trench run and just that one through line. You know, we occasionally cut back to the base, but we're just on that. After that, almost every Star Wars film had that kind of cross-cutting between all these different things going on. Like you look at the duel between Luke and Vader in Empire, you know, that we don't see that in full. You know, like literally there's that smash cut where Vader slashes a post, and then we cut to Lando and Leia and Chewbacca. So, you know, there's that idea of maybe letting things play out, but it became so big that they needed to kind of link all those different storylines into the finale of each film. But I don't mind that. I don't mind the kind of the frantic kind of cutting back and forth, and the tension that can create sometimes is pretty cool. I love how all those moving parts in the end of Return of the Jedi are put together and weaved together. Love the Han and Leia moment, you know, where they reverse the "I love you, I know," and that feels very natural, the way that their kind of relationship gets resolved, I suppose. And it's nice to see Han in a kind of vulnerable moment where he's like, oh well, when Luke gets back, you know, I won't get in the way. You know, some of his self-assuredness gets stripped away in that moment, and I really like that. Again, I know people don't like Han in Return of the Jedi, but I think he's great. I think he's really good. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, and again, and again, you know, it's a great ending. It's a great ending, and especially even with the prequel story. I mean, I said that the transition between the prequels and the originals isn't seamless, and I feel a disconnect, but I still feel like it's part of the story, and I like the part where Anakin is the chosen one, to bring balance to the Force. You know, that's a way where George wrote the prequels with that ending in mind, and knowing that could be tied into the prequels somehow. It was telling a story in the prequels based on what had come before in the originals, not the other way around like he did with the special editions. And it works, you know. He brought balance to the Force, but at the very last moment managed to redeem himself somewhat. But it's a great tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, the whole 6 movies. I only wonder what the grand story of this new trilogy will be by the time we get to the end of it, and if it will even tie as much into those first 6 movies. It all remains to be seen, and I can only assume that I'll get more answers to that in, you know, a matter of hours now. So I'm excited to see how it is going to begin to tie into other things and into the grander story. You know, it's supposed to be the Skywalker saga. They keep referencing it as the Skywalker story. Lucas always said that the sequel trilogy would have been about Darth Vader's grandkids. So, we'll see. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next one, which will be the Force Awakens vlog, which I'll do tonight, right before The Last Jedi. So, there we go.